for friend and attachment style month here at Consciously Relating Coaching. Scenario number 1 for dismissive avoidant. Now this one has a little extra to it. If this is out of a conflict, there's something that's very specific to dismissive avoidance, unlike all the other styles. But I'll get to that, so stay tuned for that. So the scenario is you have a friend that texts you or calls you and you ignore their text or call. It might be even for days. And instead you preoccupy with your immediate world and inner world, with work, with your relationship to yourself, with your creature comforts, instead of replying to them. And if this is in conflict, it's because you're avoiding that conflict. Dismissive avoidants are very conflict averse because they have a learned helplessness around conflict. They weren't modeled conflict resolution or even being in conflict, if that makes sense. They've only learned to completely distance themselves and close themselves off in conflict. They also have a learned helplessness around it. Did I mention that? And they have a wound of I am defective. So the scripts that are playing, I am helpless or incapable, I am defective, and I am weak or unsafe if I am vulnerable, emotional, or close to someone. So if you are in conflict, it makes sense that you're pulling away and you really emphasize your autonomy, and there's an ultra independence to a dismissive avoidant, and I don't need that, because they also have this learned everyone is out for themselves. So I am the only person I can rely on. No one can rely on me. I can't rely on anyone else. Everyone's out for themselves. If this is not in conflict, this is just because you sent a message to your friend that's dismissive avoidant, or you are the dismissive avoidant, and you're wondering, why don't I feel like replying to this person? Or why am I replying with a sort of detached, impersonal sort of message? It might be because of that ultra independence, your extreme need for autonomy, and to know that your autonomy is safe, because you see closeness as a challenge and a threat to that autonomy and to your freedom and your space, your personal space with yourself. And your relationship to yourself comes first. So work, creature comforts, peace of mind, they come above a relationship with others for you. And even if you're not in conflict, you might take periods of recharging because you feel drained from engaging too much, and especially if they're deeper relationships. And I will actually cover this in a future one, but it's worth mentioning for this one. Your friendships might not be daily friendships. You might prefer to have friends that you communicate occasionally, once a month or so, on the surface level. It's not very deep, and you might have deep friendships, but those you'll also minimize that contact to a couple of times a month, or even once every 2 months or so. So if this is in conflict, this is the thing that I was mentioning. This is specific and a little bit different than all the other attachment styles, because other attachment styles have some sort of desire to resolve conflict. A fearful avoidant might lean more avoidant and can have more of time for space, but they can also understand more of the dynamic of conflict, and they're not unfamiliar with conflict. They're not as conflict adverse as the dismissive avoidants are. So if you are in conflict, you are the friend of a dismissive avoidant, and you are in conflict and they are not replying to your text message or phone call, take a deep breath, ground yourself, depersonalize and differentiate, activate that differentiation, and give them that space. This is really important. Now, I'm not saying give them more space than you feel is respectful to you and your needs, but give them a few days, or it depends on the situation, it depends on the conflict, it depends on your relationship, but just give them a little bit of space for them to have. And during this time, you can do these things, which is ground yourself, take a deep breath, get curious and recognize the deep wounds and what these actions are sort of showing potentially, the deep-rooted fears, especially the ones that came up in the conflict. If this is not in conflict, this is still, if you are triggered by this, you're probably one of the other attachment styles that I've mentioned so far, and it's still important to ground yourself, take a deep breath, recognize the wounds, the potential wounds and fears deeply rooted, and then assess how much are they aware. Get curious about their self-awareness with these wounds and fears and these actions. Are they on autopilot? Are they aware? Do they know? Have you had a conversation with them them about how this is something they do. That's such a scale. It's not you either know or don't know. There's a scale to self-awareness. When you get in contact, when they reply, or if it's been quite a few days, quite a long time, validate and recognize and acknowledge where they are. Reassure them from a place of empathy and differentiation. Present your side always with compassion, empathetically, and with differentiation. And this is one attachment style that loves practical and less so emotional. If this is you, well, take a deep breath and ground yourself in your body. Try your best to not go into your usual distractions of creature comforts, such as video games, listening to YouTube podcasts, cleaning around the house, etc. It's great, especially if it's a greater conflict. I personally believe that it is great to have a buffer period where maybe you do clean around your house or you do play some video game to just sort of calm down your nervous system, but try to calm down your nervous system through more present techniques with yourself, because you love your relationship to yourself. So find a way to cultivate that relationship by being still with yourself. Take a deep breath and without judgment, listen to your inner dialogue. Listen to the thoughts. Validate that part that's keeping you safe through these actions and get curious with what that inner dialogue is telling you through these actions. What is this tactic keeping you safe from? And then to skip ahead to my bonus for this one, just to kind of wrap it up in a nice little ball cake. Think of what other reasons might your friend have for reaching out, or if in conflict especially, what other reasons could there be for that conflict to arise other than those encroaching on your personal space, needs and boundaries, etc. And then B, and this is super helpful for all of us, when in that particular relationship with that particular friend, when were you in harmony? When were you safe with them? When were you valued by them? And when were you free with them? Because this can be as soon as 2 hours prior to that conflict. And this is something where if you're dysregulated in your nervous system, when you're in complete activation, you will not see that. No one, it doesn't matter what attachment style you are, you will not see these things. You might even actually actively push those away and say, oh, those are actually fake. This is the real thing. The last number 5 is find 5 pieces of evidence in all the areas of your life: work, other relationships, spiritual relationship, your emotional, physical being, your mental being, walking down the street, of when you are free, when were you in harmony, when you are safe, when you are worthy or valued or valuable. And this is a super great one for dismissive avoidance. When has vulnerability been safe? Not just been safe, but also a strength, because dismissive avoidant attachment sees vulnerability as weakness and emotion as weakness and needs as weakness and anything of our emotional part of our being, which is a natural part of our being that we cannot be separate from. A dismissive avoidant attachment sees that as weakness. So when were those a strength? And as always, lead with empathy and differentiation. Get curious and not judgmental. Peace, love, and compassion and differentiation.